Hello and welcome to another episode of O'Day and Night. I'm your host, Adam O'Day. Today I'll be previewing the University of Oklahoma's 2023 football season. Even though they disappointed big time last year, with finishing 6-7 with a loss in a bowl game to Florida State, I believe that the Sooners will bounce back in a big way, losing just 3 regular season games. I believe those 3 losses will be to the University of Texas, Central Florida, and West Virginia. Texas, historically, over the past 5-10 years, OU has dominated the series, but as we saw last year, Texas went into Dallas and handed the Sooners a beating, winning 49-0. I don't believe it'll be nearly that bad, but I do believe Texas will end up winning again. Central Florida and West Virginia, I believe, are 2 potential trap games that OU could fall into. The Sooners seem to always struggle with West Virginia and ended up losing to them last year. The UCF, they're new to the conference, and I believe one of the better additions to the Big 12 as far as football goes. So I believe that they will end up beating OU this year. And a few impact players this year. For OU, I believe will be obviously Dillon Gabriel, dealt with injuries each of the past 2 seasons. Hurt his clavicle in 2021 while at UCF, and then last year missed OU Texas with a concussion, dealt with some of those all year. But I believe that this QB room is talented enough to, hold their own. And if Gabriel gets injured for the 3rd year in a row, Jackson Arnold and General Booty are able to take over and do well. Another key impact player on that offense will be Drake Stoops. He's been a little bit overshadowed in his career, even though he is the son of legendary football coach Bob Stoops. But when you're OU and you have guys like CeeDee Lamb and Marvin Mims, how do you not play either one of them over Drake Stoops, So I believe this year Stoops will break out and have a great year. He's caught 80 balls for 900 plus yards and 7 scores over his career, and I believe he'll come close to those numbers this year. And flipping sides of the ball to the defense, Danny Stutzman and Ethan Downs will play huge roles for this OU defense. Stutzman plays with a lot of energy. He's a great athlete, and sure, he makes a lot of mistakes, but he's had, a long time this offseason to work on those. And, he led the Big 12 in tackles last year. So the upside is there. So I believe he will come into his own even more and be a great draft prospect this time a year from now. And Ethan Downs is coming into his junior year and saw snaps in all 13 games as a true freshman and sophomore. While the numbers haven't quite been there just yet over the course of his 2 years, he's already got 16.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. So I believe he'll be a great force on that D-line for Brent Venables and OU. And he will definitely be a key factor if OU is to finish 9-3 this year. And another impact player came into this transfer recruiting class. Austin Stodner followed quarterback Spencer Rattler to South Carolina last offseason after former coach Lincoln Riley left for USC. He his stats aren't eye-popping. In 4 years, less than 900 yards, only 9 touchdowns, but he'll be a pretty good run blocker, great check down, and just an overall great leader for that locker room, especially with how many young guys OU's got. So I believe that this offense will be a little bit more consistent, and defensively they'll be able to hold their own. A few favorable matchups OU's got in conference play are OSU, TCU, and BYU. Now, OSU, they won't really be tested all that much this year, coming into Bedlam, and if OU is playing like I believe they should and can, then I believe that Oklahoma will be able to easily beat Oklahoma State, but with it being Bedlam, OSU last year, even though they got whooped in the first quarter, they were able to make it a halfway respectable score. And TCU, they were the kings of one-score games. 10 total games last year were decided by 10 points or fewer for TCU. And they lost their QB1 from last year, Max Duggan. And I believe that they'll take a big hit because Chandler Morris is supposed to be the starter next year and, transferred from OU, and I don't think he's going to be that good for them. He'll produce pretty well, but, he's coming off an injury that had him lose the starting job to Duggan last year. So we'll see if he comes out and plays with a chip on his shoulder and leads TCU to a great record, but I don't see it. Then BYU, they're making the jump from independent FBS team to the Big 12. So first time they've been in a conference, at least in a while. They lost their QB1 as well, and they were pretty inconsistent last year. Lost by 3 touchdowns to Oregon, who was ranked number 15 at the time. Lost by 8 points to Notre Dame, who was 18th at the time. And then by 17 points to an unranked and, in all honesty, kind of mid Arkansas team. And then they beat Baylor in overtime. So they have proven that they are capable of playing well against superior opponents, but, they just aren't consistently good enough to beat these good programs. So, you can't really overlook them, but, OU should beat them. So, that's all the time I had for today. Thank you for tuning in.